Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the discussion, the little fireside chat with our ministers in government. And is he allowed to come? And I would like to invite the guests to join me up here. Xavier, Anders, Paulina, and Yoko. So thank you for joining us here in the room. Actually, it's being broadcast as well on Facebook and on Instagram. So it seems like it's quite an empty space, but actually there's a lot more going on here than you would think. So we would like to make this quite informal, because we hear a lot about policy points and how to win elections and everything else. But you guys are actually sitting in the seat of power. And I think it's really nice to share with people what that is actually like. And I'm going to start, Xavier, with you, because you've been there the longest. When you said 1999, I'm like, yeah, I know, I was there too. That's how old we actually are. But if you would look back at some point, like say you're 95 or something, of all the things that you've experienced and done, which is the one you would be most proud of? And would it be a political thing?
The most proud is that my husband is still happy with me. So that's
totally agree.
That's the most important thing. No, the fact is, the worst thing is if you would think it's a personal success, because a lot of politicians think that it's because of them and it's because of people who trusted you and the dynamic you were able to do. And for me, when the most difficult decisions was in 2011, when I became mayor, to leave the office in 2013 to become a prime minister, because I didn't know what was the job, and I was never in the government. And then to be a young liberal, being gay in a conservative country where usually Christian Democrats have the prime minister. Since Second World War, we just had one with Gaston Thorn, a liberal prime minister for 5 years. So to be nominated was a big challenge. And then everybody said, that's an error, he won't stay very long, he will have a crisis, he won't be able to keep the government together. Then I did it for 10 years. And for me, so the most proud thing it was to be able to change in my country is first to do the separation between church and state. Second thing was to...
When you say do the separation between church
and
state,
so, for example, my national day was an office at church. That was National Day. Now it's a civil celebration where we celebrate people. But it was also the fact that we had an abortion law which was very strict, where, in fact, as a woman, you had to justify why you want to abort. It was so a lot of things where I think it was important to put my country on a more modern side, but also to stay competitive, to do ecological topics, to be liberal but also social, and to show to people that you can do it when you believe in things. And so what the most proudest thing was that it was not a one shot, so we were able to continue the government in 2018. And in 2023, in fact, I had personally the most votes. My party was the biggest winner in seats growth, but the collapse of the Greens made it impossible to continue the coalition between the three parties, or I still would be prime minister, but it's not the ego. So when the thing I'm the most proudest, it's not me, but it's what we did together with the partners, to be able to find partners, to be able to find programs. And the most difficult things I had to do was the COVID period during these years as a liberal, to say to people, you're not allowed to open your shop, you're not allowed to see your parents, you're not allowed to visit your friends at the hospital. This was the most difficult to risk, because I always fought for liberties, and then to tell to people you cannot was for me the most difficult. I had that stress, so it was also difficult for my husband. And if we were just able to, because a lot of politicians think that after them nothing will be able to work the same. We are just there, a short sentence in a book and not even a page. But if we are able to build on this construct, to fight for what we believe in, that's the most proud that I am. It's to never have given up the values, because very often people, and sometimes even in the family, have stupid jokes, racist, homophobic, xenophobic jokes, and with friends. and not to laugh, but to say, do you think it's funny? And so to be, in fact, intolerant to intolerance. And that's, I'm very proud to still have stayed to it, because I lived moments where being extreme right were more popular, because I just remind the race with Poland and Italy 7-8 years ago. Now we're again in one of these waves, but we don't have to blame these electors, but have to show them that there are other ways, on a democratic way, that their fears shouldn't result in populist governance in European countries. So never give up. Sometimes you're up, sometimes you are down, but there will be always another day. Voilà.
That's wonderful.
Thank
Very
you.
inspiring. Thanks. Paulina, I'm going to go to you, because I don't know if everybody knows you yet. It seems to be a trend to go from being a prosecutor to go into politics. We hope one soon will become President of the United States. Can you tell us a little bit how you went from being a prosecutor to being Minister of Gender?
Actually, I had quite a quick journey into politics. I've worked for 12 years as a public prosecutor, and I've mainly worked with domestic violence, sexual violence, and also trafficking in human beings and gang violence. And doing that, I felt almost an unbearable frustration when I saw all these women having to live with secret identity for many, many years, being threatened, being in extremely, having their liberty taken away completely. To see young girls in Sweden living in a context, a so-called honor-based context, where their families control so they don't play with boys in school, so they cover all their bodies, even the really small girls. I just couldn't stand to see this. So my political journey actually started on social media. And I did that in 2020, and I built a platform, and I actually spoke out about what I saw. And then I was very shocked to be appointed minister 2 years ago. So that's, everything that all the frustration that I felt being a prosecutor, seeing all this, is my driving force in politics now. And I feel very honored to be able to have this job and actually change things that I've been so frustrated about.
And does it work? I mean, do you feel you can do more as a politician than as a prosecutor, or different things?
As a prosecutor, you feel it's very hands-on. You have this, case, and you see this very vulnerable person, and your job actually makes a difference in that person's life. Of course, in politics, it's more the bigger structures. Of course, it helps when you can change the structures. It means that you can help more people. But I think everyone in politics is wishing that everything could change faster, could be that you can make quicker difference than you can. So of course that's something that I'm struggling with right now. But to me, it feels really, really good to be able to change things, to change these structures that should have been changed for many, many years ago.
Yeah. And it's interesting that you say that you started out on Instagram, because I hadn't realized, Anders, when we had lunch, that you are now also an Instagram sensation with your cello concerto for commemorating a very sad occasion, 500 days of the war in Ukraine. How do you combine being a politician with something as deeply emotional and artistic as playing this beautiful piece of Ukrainian folk music?
Well, I don't think really think that it's about combining. I think you try to use the tools that you have to try to express and communicate your thoughts and your feelings. And I think music in general, I mean, words reach you on some level, you decipher them and understand their meaning. I think music carries often a lot more. it reaches deeper into you. Music carries cultural implications, history, other sensations. There's a lot of symbolism in music that might not be carried by words as effectively. In this case, after the world broke out in Ukraine, after Russia invaded, there was this folk song, Ukrainian folk song, that, from the 19th century, that every once in a while came up in the Ukrainian sphere and was performed by many people, through history. And now after the war, on the first or second day of the war, a Ukrainian rapper performed it on the streets of Kiev. Then Pink Floyd performed it, and choirs all over the world. And then somehow, one Sunday, I thought that, okay, so maybe I should try to do it. And then I took my son to a closed House of Parliament and went to this empty hall, and then I recorded different voices of that song and then put it together. And if I had known that it became such a sensation in many ways, I would have maybe not done it on the first take, but taken a few others. But so it ended up being not a very perfect recording in itself, but evidently it did convey such a message that I'm proud to be one of the Finnish politicians that has been lambasted by the spokesperson of the Russian foreign minister in a press conference. So I'm that Finnish cello-playing minister that's fallen for the Ukrainian propaganda and whatnot, according to
Congratulations.
her.
Very well
That's
done.
a badge of honor.
This may be your big claim to fame in your period as minister. But this is not the first time you're minister. If I would ask you the same question as Xavier, do you feel you can actually achieve something, and especially in coalition, and especially when you're in a complicated coalition like you're in, and maybe lead it in a bit, because I don't know if everybody's totally aware of the Finnish situation momentarily.
Yes, so I was Minister of European Affairs and Ownership Steering, and now I'm Minister of Education. And yes, we have a complicated coalition. In Finland, we have a tradition of coalition governments. We have 9 parties in government, and most coalitions have been tried, except maybe for this one from before. So we are a liberal party. We are in a coalition with the Christian Democrats, the National Coalition Party, 2 EPP parties, and then the Finns party, who is a populist right-wing party. So we are at the both opposite ends of the spectrum. And the first year of government has not been all in all easy. Then again, you could make an argument that, considering the economic challenges, this is probably the government that can make some labor reforms really needed to put the Finnish economy in the right direction. But it also, of course, comes with complicated questions, and there is a clash of values between us and the Finns party. They happen often, I could say, which means that the governmental program is very important. We really need to decide on beforehand what we will do and then stick to that, and ideally nothing else unless we can agree on it together. And that part of the coalition works fairly well, but of course the cultures of the 2 parties are quite different, and there is a lot of discussion around government that, of course, also is related to that fact that we are fairly different.
Yeah. It's really interesting and quite refreshing that you say how difficult it is, because I think sometimes when people make coalitions, they pretend as if it's actually a happy marriage, when sometimes it's more like a forced marriage or something, you do for the kids, but you're not necessarily very much engaged in it. I think the honesty is something that is something goes lost somewhere in the political discourse along the way.
Yeah, I think liberal parties have different tasks at different times. We were in the previous government. We had a different task at that point. We were in a big part responsible for the economy and employment things, entrepreneurship, and now we are the liberal party taking care of the liberal values, being present and being respected, and maybe when you have a world where polarization is, I mean, a fact in most countries. We, of course, try different ways of tackling this phenomena, and I think there is a special role for us liberal parties to somehow try to keep the middle standing, to avoid extreme polarization, to be a sane voice in a difficult world, and to come up with, I think, people need now more than ever, which is solutions. Lots of parties are basing their politics on fear, polarization. We often import the culture wars from the other side of the Atlantic and inject them in our politics where they really should not have a place and traditionally haven't had such a big position. And in this fairly tricky situation, I think it's important that the liberal actors have a voice and they are present at the tables where the decisions are made, that they bring forward the liberal things and create hope in the sense that we also increasingly have the responsibility to provide the solutions needed when other people's other ends are dig down in their potholes.
Yeah. Now I'm going to go to you, Yoko, because you are like the ultimate, dream career. You start out in the city council, then you go to parliament and you become a minister. You're one of those, picture-perfect poster girls for the Alliance of Her, how we want women to grow in these leadership roles. Which of these has been the most fun for you?
Fun? Wow.
Or do you have fun at all? Maybe that I should see the first question.
I think, for example, hearing this about seeing actually the people behind, and hearing these colleagues who I haven't met before, but I hear this kind of the same kind of burning, But maybe fun is interesting. I think the humor is always important, but I think in general the personal development, that side of things maybe has been the most important in that sense, that also in the Alliance of Her, my role was never to help these women get elected, but actually stay in politics, the resilience, the constant work that you need to do with yourself to be clear about your own values, about how much you can do, which is your part, and how to not fall to bits under the weight of feeling that maybe you should do everything, And I think this continuation, and also like Javier mentioned, it's worth it and you can do the job if you work enough on yourself to be on your top level, because the role of a minister actually demands this, and no one else is going to do that part for you. So I think for me, this is the greatest opportunity, the intensity of that work, but at the same time realizing that the most personal is often the most universal in a way. That if you see these things, if you are honest about these things within yourself, you might actually find a lot of allies in very unexpected places also. And how to also bring this kind of, I'm an architect, and I learned just that also my neighbor here is also an architect in politics. We have the issue of human scale in the living environment, but what about the human scale in politics? I think also this is something that can work actually against this polarization. The polarization is often a kind of veil, it's a veil of not being actually radically honest with each other. So maybe in this time of, the fun should always be looked for, and one should always be able to laugh about oneself, and how many evenings as a new minister, now 3 months in office, couple of evenings I have come home and felt like total shit, like really like crying, and also letting all this pressure out, and then feeling like, oh, tomorrow I'll be okay again, But this needs to be a conscious process. And I think that's also what we can do as politicians, because we are not some kind of, different people. It's the same thing all about it. And maybe then it makes it easier for us to also listen. If we are used to listen to ourselves, also listen to others.
And how do you do it yourself? Because you're saying you want to make people more resilient, because if you're Minister of Climate, and especially in a country bordering on Russia with a constant security threat in your background, how do you actually cordon off what is yours to take on, and how do you keep yourself sane and standing?
I think it actually started off for me from a quite severe burnout, sort of in the middle of my political career. And then I really very consciously started working on what are my personal core values, defining these, also finding the kind of courage to look at not only the positive things, but realizing that after such a conference, you actually also need time to breathe out. There is the breathing in and there is the breathing out. And again, also defining for yourself maybe what are the small victories. We don't, you asked also what you are most proud of. I think we rarely pat ourselves on the back, actually, for real at least. We maybe boast about things in some kind of election debates, but what do we really value? Where did we put our role in? Like, I see that I managed to change the debate in my party about the living environment, about the environmental issues. And it's the biggest party, it's the Prime Minister party now. This is one of our priority issues. And I know that I have had a role in that, But I also know that, we talked about hope, we talked about fear. There is also the anxiety and the fear that is paralyzing, versus the fear that is anxiety. And anxiety is normal, It's if you go into different situations where you want to tell people that we want to start mining here in your area, of course it makes us anxious, but we can't be paralyzed about it if we want to give some hope that maybe this will help us be strategically autonomous, This will help us be secure and safe, and keep the environment for our kids. So I think this radical honesty with yourself helps you to actually listen to people without judging them directly.
Xavier, have you had those nights where you come home and you feel like crying?
I'm always happy to be home, but the fact is, very often I see also a lot of liberal parties around Europe, also in the LI. Very often, I'm sorry to say that, but we have no ambitions. We are very often a boutique party, where...
You mean appealing to a small group of voters?
Yeah, where we think... I see it, for example, my party. My party, at the beginning, we were then more left-wing, then more right-wing, then more left-wing, then more right-wing. And then you have some people, and that's a minority in the party, who thinks we should be really ultra-liberal, but really economically ultra-liberal. That's boutique. That's boutique. And they think you just have to fight for the economy. That's wrong. That's what I said this morning. Some people try to put us in this corner where liberals are just there for wealthy people, just there for rich people, and they don't understand that this is, I just want that people are proud when they risk, when they work more, when they take that you want to take initiatives, but that you know that some people are not able to, so you need to support them more, and that you have to have free education. I'm sorry for all the ones who are against, but everybody needs to have the same chances to have success in their life. And then also that we are open for compromise. There are red lines, but we are not the one who are, as soon as you speak, for example, about I had in my country, for example, the minority rights. At the beginning, when we were in the majority in between 1999 and 2004, they said, but Xavier, will you support the government even if they just do the civil partnership and not the gay wedding? I said, we do step by step. Don't be extremist in all the directions. With the abortion at the beginning, when they said we have to open everything, the one and the other say we have to forbid everything, we need to be the one who will be pragmatic. And that's, for example, when you see the collapse for the moment of the Greens party in Europe, it's because they are very dogmatic and not pragmatic. And if we are dogmatic also as liberals to see we are just all the liberties, all the liberties, economic, right, extreme right, no intervention from the state, no support from the state, nothing, then we do an error. And I think this is sometimes where you have some parties, they are at 3 or 4%, and they think that they are happy when they are arriving 5 or 6%. But this is not for me the center. The center, we have to accept that we will be sometimes more left-wing, sometimes more right-wing, but pragmatic. And sometimes I miss this pragmatism in European parties when they are the one who said, oh no, if they are against this, we cannot enter the government. And I know for some of my colleagues here, even around the table, and also your country, the question is, are you able to participate in the government with extreme right parties? That's a topic we have everywhere. That's a topic. So some of you will say no, if they are liberals, they have to refuse. But I'm very honest with you. I prefer that they are in the government where they are responsible for the decisions taken by the government. And so they avoid that even if populists are elected, do populist politics. And are able to block them. And that these populists knows that they won't be able to do as far as they want because they need the support of this liberal party. And if everybody says we stay outside, they will find another majority without us. But it's dangerous because we don't have to be also the porte-clés of populist party. So we need to find the right balance. And I know there is big division also in the ALDE and everywhere to discuss about that. But believe me, if we never let them take responsibilities, they will grow. And if we don't control them because we say we all stay outside and just do what you want, they will be less controlled, but it's a difficult decision. I was never in the situations where I had to have an extremist party. And I know myself that I won't be able to do it myself. So it's a bit complicated what I say, because I said to the others, if you have in the situations better to be in than out, I won't be able to do it. I won't be able to do it because I can't. But sometimes it's better to be in the house and to have a power to do things and to avoid especially other things than to be outside and just criticizing. But it's a difficult situation, and my wish would be, instead of blaming these extremist voters, because a lot of people are not extremists, but they vote for extreme parties because they have fears, and we blame them. We say, you are wrong. That's not enough. I know the difference between a populist and us. It's very often the populist has, to the most complicated questions, the shortest answer. And we have, for the easiest questions, the most complicated answer. But that's the difference between a populist and a Democrat. And we need to take time to explain to people, but we should also be able to touch topics where people don't think that we will take the time to listen to them and trying to understand their fears and bring them back to the values. Because at the end, migration is a chance for Europe. But we have to be able to say that we have migration under control. If we don't have it, they won't trust it. And I could take 10 topics like this, where at the end of the day, they won't trust us because they will look for the easiest answer, even if it's not working. And so I don't want to be a boutique shop. I still want to be in a government. We are about 18 and 20%. So I think for a Liberal Party, it's not the 40% that you could have in some countries, between 18 and 20%. There were 11 years in the government, but I don't stick to the power. I love being part of a majority where we, as I told you before, being able to change the things. So don't be boutique, but don't be compliant to populist, but especially avoid. Listen to the people and listen to their fears and stay honest. If you stay honest and you don't change, because if you want to copy the populists, then it's the end of the day, believe me. They will go back to the original. They don't want to copy for long. It will be a one-shot success, but then afterwards, you are gone. So sometimes you lose polls, but I always lost all the polls, but won the elections. I prefer that than being good in polls
the other way around.
and lose all the elections.
Yeah.
But just to tell all the colleagues, and my problem is also that we do not, as liberals, and then I promise I'm too long, but I haven't been able to speak the last day, so I still have some pensum to give. We also, as liberals, and I do autocritics, and Diederik is trying to do the best to coordinate the work of the liberals. But I see it with others. We had meetings of Liberal Minister of Foreign Affairs. We were two. I had, and we do not coordinate enough. Mm-hmm. And I even see it, for example, as a Benelux. I had before with Alex and Mark Rutte, friends, we were meeting before every meetings to prepare the Committee of Foreign Affairs. We don't do it anymore. Yeah. So I see that even to work together with other partners, with political partners, with strategic partners, is not working anymore as it did the last 10 years. So we should not criticize, we should change it, we should do it, but also we should participate in it. And I say it again, to have no prime minister on the Congress. It's very nice to send videos.
Better to show up.
Voilà.
Anders,
you.
You wanted to jump in here.
Yeah.
First,
about the concept of how you deal with populist parties.
He was there when we had meetings. I just want to say.
I mean, one way is, of course, to keep them outside and draw a stark difference. Do what you do and let them do what you do, and then probably watch them grow. Then you can keep them on the outside and adapt their policies, change yourself, and then you really cause a big win. Or then you try to keep them in government, form governments where you say that we are different, and these are our values, those are theirs. We see other things we can agree on, and then you accept the clashes and the fact that we think differently about this, but also at the same time force everybody to take responsibility for the coalition. And of course, I think time will tell what is the right route. And in Finland we are taking the last one at present. But I really like your concept of radical honesty. I think that's maybe something for the liberal movement in general. And your thoughts on pragmatism. I think if the essence of liberalism is freedom, freedom at extremes, I think, takes away freedom. So freedom must also recognize that people are different, and we have there's different capacities and possibilities, and in a free country or in a free system, you also see that, which means that like total dogmatic liberalism might not take you towards absolute freedom, but there needs to be a pragmatic road in order to achieve that.
That's a very nice, very hopeful tone. I want to just get back for a moment to the less hopeful atmosphere we have in the world, to the geopolitical situation, but also the culture wars, almost a backlash where, when we talk about equality, people call it woke. And I'm looking at you, Paulina. You know, when I just saw a news report in Australia that a quarter of Australian young men look to Andrew Tate as a role model. And especially with your background in prosecution and, you know, dealing with women who've been at the receiving end of some of this violence, how can we have another voice? What is the antidote to the poison of this movement, which is trying to push us back and kind of make us lose what we've won in these past decades, especially as women?
I mean, that's a very, very important question, because you're right. We see many men, not only in Australia, in many parts of the world, that really have Andrew Tate and other really toxic role models when it comes to who they look up to. I think when we talk about, well, in the field of gender equality, we need to see that we need to work with both women's rights, but also with men's role models, because that's very much part of the problem. And we see a polarization, not only when it comes to left-right, but we also see polarization in many issues, and it's really, really something that we need to address. The problem is that we live in a media landscape where the most extreme positions is what makes the headlines. That's what the algorithms, that's what reaches our younger generation, that's what people read about. It's really, really difficult to try to reach out with a sane position. As Anders said, we as liberals, we want to be the sane voice. And the question that we need to ask ourselves is, how do we reach out? How do we reach out? How do we deliver the sane message in a media landscape where the only thing that people hear are the two sides of well, either or, the most extreme positions? I think we need to obviously it's difficult, but we can't give up. We have to try to manage through this landscape. And I think it's very important that we talk to the younger generation, make them aware of this polarization, and try to really define values that should really go through our entire education system, that we can never be value neutral. We have to really stand up for the values that are worth fighting for. So I think it's a really hard fight, but we really need to take it. And we need to talk about gender equality, for example, as not something that's only a women's rights issue. It's something that all of our society gain from. That's the perspective that we need to take, and then we have to try to, join forces to deliver that message.
Yeah. So we're actually already coming into our last minutes. This went so incredibly fast, but I would love for each of you to give a reflection, I think, for the people here. Like, if you had one more thing while you were in government that you could achieve, just one that you had to pick and that was doable. But let's say, have more of a majority and you would get all that. You wouldn't have to actually deal with the political reality. What would it be? What is one thing that you could do right now that you would love to do if you had the majority to just push it through? Yoko.
I can start maybe once people get to think, but I would just like to follow up the previous one also about freedom. And I think in a way our only freedom as human beings is actually where we direct our attention. And this is what we are fighting against also with the new technology, which is also making our attention go into places where maybe we don't always choose. So I think what we can work on is not also what we are against, but what we are for, to make the young also direct their attention to this. So I think this again starts from a very kind of personal defining, or the kind of duty of staying positive, thinking about Karl Popper. But the one thing I would like to achieve is the energy transition, which obviously consists of 100 things, but I think energy is the source of all life, and it needs to be renewable, it needs to be able to be stored, and some of it needs to be available when it is needed. So you can actually say it from a very human perspective, but it is the ground for our economy, the ground for the living environment to be there, and also for the security. So that's my...
So which percentage are you at, and where would you like to be at the end of the mandate?
We had, in the last quarter, we had actually half of the energy consumed was renewable, but obviously we have our oil shale, which is at home and available, but I think we need to also move the narrative from this, that it costs. It's actually a lot cheaper to do these things than to not to do this. So a positive green growth, that's what I would like to at least nudge into the right direction. I understand I can't do it all, but I can help nudge it in the right direction.
Nice. Anders?
That's a really a big question to ask what you would want to achieve, and of course I'll try to answer it from the scope of my portfolio, which is that of Minister of Education. Well, generally in Finland, I mean, we have a really strange discussion going on as I see it, on immigration in general. I mean, Finland is, the furthest, as far away in Europe as you can go. People often don't even remember that Finland exists, and it's certainly not the fact that people would think that, okay, where should I go? I'll go to Finland, and we'll come flood your country. Finland is, I mean, the problem of Finland is that we don't attract enough people. We don't attract enough people and we don't attract enough investment, and Finland should really try to change that and somehow make it an attractive country to move to, which means that we should be like the easiest, the best integrating country in Europe, where you get all your paperwork done in 2 weeks, you get bank account, a job and school and so on, and we are not really there yet, and unfortunately the general political discussion doesn't really support such ambitions either. But I think we would need a change of mindset where we'd understand that we need to invite people and attract them to our country. That's like one general concept. But if I may continue from my portfolio of education, actually slightly on the same topic. Some PISA results were released a few days ago, the PISA results from 22, but now focusing on children with an immigrant background. And we notice that, I mean, our general results have gone down, but the results of children with an immigrant background have also gone down, which shows that our schools are not doing their job. We are failing in that regard. And to some extent, I think that we politicians have a responsibility, how we talk about immigrants, about immigration, how we talk about diversity. So I would hope that at the end of my term, that difference would be evened out, that children from different backgrounds would all feel at home in our schools. They would all receive the support that they need, and that the results would be the same from whatever background you are, because that has traditionally been the strength of the Finnish education system. And at present, we are not really reaching that goal.
That's also a wonderful ambition. Xavier.
It's a bit difficult because I'm Minister of Foreign Affairs, so as Minister of Foreign Affairs, my biggest wish would that in the Middle East, in Ukraine, the war would stop, but it's not in my competences to take the final decisions, but that would be my biggest wish. And not only there, when I see how it's in Africa, believe me, the world is on fire. I have people who ask me, is a third war possible? Imagine. And these persons lived the Second World War. And we can do everything to avoid it, but believe me, it's really crazy. And we see that all the international organizations, and as I told you, I come back from the UNGA, we are barking dogs without teeth. We bark and bark and bark, but we don't bite. And that's a problem. We see also the European Union. We see Security Council where one veto is enough to block international decisions. So we did regulations and decisions making in honeymoon phase, and we see that when it's more complicated, we say the status on Facebook situation, that we are not able to act as international community, and it's a bit a shame. And for me, what is complicated as a politician is, I told you before, we need to listen to people and give them answers. And on the international pocket, for the moment, I don't have answers. I can try to do what I can, but, you know, the Minister of Foreign Affairs from Luxembourg was not the one where people said, oh, if he says that, we have to do it. But we are a little piece of part of decision makers, and we will continue to fight for this. And it's terrible to say that today in 2024, still depending where you get born, depends your success and your rights. And we have to fight for that. Thank you.
And I think this is the kind of radical honesty that also builds trust. Paulina, I'm going to give you the last word. What would you like to achieve in your mandate?
Well, as the Minister for Gender Equality in Sweden, I'm proud of what my country have achieved, and I'm proud to be able to spread examples of what we're doing in Sweden to promote gender equality. And I'm so glad when I see other countries wanting to listen to us. At the same time, to reconnect to where I started, I'm ashamed that we do not offer gender equality to everyone in Sweden. When you look at Sweden today, it's very divided. We have most of the population where gender equality is something that everyone takes for granted. And then we have one context, a cultural context where gender equality is very, very far away, where girls and boys have extremely different conditions and rights, and where girls' rights are extremely limited, where we have forced marriages, we have honor-based oppression, violence, and if I can achieve more freedom for these girls, if I can make them feel as gender equality also applies to them, that would be one of my biggest political dreams.
Wonderful, thank you very much. Yeah. With that, may I have a warm hand for our panel. I found it very inspiring, and not just to listen to your political visions, but also to meet a little bit more the people behind the politics. And I think at the end of the day, politics is just about being human and getting as many other people to be engaged in making the world a better place. So thank you very much for this honor. There's another panel coming up, so we're going to have to clear the stage for that one. And thank you very much. One more warm hand, please, for our wonderful panel.
Yes. Hi, sorry. Sorry. Nice to meet you.
So let's start right in time with a little bit of a delay. I welcome you all to this afternoon session on security. It's a great pleasure and honor to moderate this discussion. I may briefly introduce myself. My name is Karl-Heinz Paquet. I'm chairman of the Friedrich Naumann Foundation for Freedom, member of the Liberals in Germany, the FDP, and deputy chairman of Liberal International. And I'm not, I have to admit, a security specialist. I'm a humble economist. But, you know, since February 2022 at the latest, security, defense is on everybody's mind in Europe. And so to have a 1-hour session, especially on security and defense, when we speak about Europe, is absolutely adequate. Well, I'm sure after the hour, not remotely all questions will be answered, but at least a few will be picked, chosen, and tentatively answered. For me, it's a great pleasure to have a prominent panel next to me here on stage. And let me briefly introduce our four panelists. We have Johan Persson, a leader of Liberalerna Party, Minister of Education of Sweden. Welcome, Johan, here on the panel. Next to him, we have Marie-Agnes Strack-Zimmermann, Chair of the Subcommittee on Security and Defense of the European Parliament, member of my own party. Marie-Agnes, welcome on the panel.
Thank you.
We have Vadim Halaichuk, Member of Parliament of the Rada in Ukraine, Deputy Chair of the Committee on Ukraine's EU integration. Welcome, Vadim. And we have Kajsa Ollongren, former Minister of Defense of the Netherlands, from our good friends from D66. Welcome to you. We structured the discussion in the following way. At first, I would propose and ask all of the participants to make a 5-minute statement on specific issues. Then we have 15 minutes, round about 15 minutes for discussion on the floor, and then we open the discussion to the general audience. Let me start with Ukraine. I think we should start with Ukraine. And Vadim, the big question before we come to long-term issues that we discuss, long-term strategic questions of Europe, is a sort of short or medium-term question. What do you have in mind in terms of urgencies, if I may put it that way, when it comes to the defense of Ukraine? What are the immediate needs of Ukraine for the next 6 months, for the next year, for the near future, to defend itself against the Russian aggressor? And we all know Ukraine must not lose that war. Ukraine must win the war. Please, could you tell us what is, in your view, the most urgent, what are the most urgent needs?
Well, thank you for the question. A very important definition is what is the strategy? I mean, war in Ukraine started in 2014 with annexation of Crimea, and that's when the world was shocked, the world was surprised, and unfortunately didn't act the way that should have. And here we have the situation where unpunished evil has returned big time with full-fledged aggression, full-fledged invasion. And unfortunately, even then, the world didn't react in terms of proper strategy. And you just mentioned that the sort of your strategy for today still is that Ukraine must not lose and Russia must not win. And that's a difficult one in terms of putting it in practical solutions on the ground. We still do lack strategic vision on what do we do with Russia so that it doesn't win this war. How do we help Ukraine so it doesn't lose the war? Of course, there are immediate needs on the ground. Arming Ukraine, providing us with permission to use arms with no restrictions. As I'm sure everybody knows, we are very active now on getting permission to strike deeper into Russia. Military targets, of course, and we still don't have that. As a result of this, I would say blunder in terms of putting together a succinct strategy. Ukraine recently has been experienced very difficult times on the Eastern Front with Russian troops advancing. We see them amassing, we see them putting together the armed depots, but we cannot do much about it because of those restrictions. And the problem, unfortunately, is growing. Russian troops are advancing. Every day we hear about loss of small villages and, unfortunately, even bigger cities. The ultimatum that Putin has made, that Ukraine should remove all its troops from the 4 regions that Russia claims are now their own, then included them into their constitution as Russian territories. And that's his condition for even starting not negotiations, but setting the stage for future negotiations and agreements. It's showing clearly that Russians have used this indecisiveness that we have in forming the strategy, indecisiveness in providing assistance to Ukraine and giving us the free hand in how we use that assistance to advance towards that goal. Therefore, the effect that those restrictions have is very detrimental on both the situation on the ground for our troops and, unfortunately, for Ukrainian society. This indecisiveness and this issue that we don't really understand what's the end game gives us, I mean, the government, a very serious problem of explaining to our people, explaining to our soldiers what it is, what the strategy is, and how do we move on. So we do experience difficulties with motivating the troops, which, as I said, can see the enemy, can strike the enemy, but don't get permission to do so. Yeah. It's one of the major ones. Plus, the ability of Russia to produce weapons and ammunition much faster in much bigger quantities than we do and our partners is also quite demoralizing, and it raises a question: why did it happen that Russian economy, which is I don't know 1/10 of the European, is capable of doing that, and the European economy isn't? So all these questions have resulted in this pretty sad mood in Ukrainian society, which of course the troops on the ground also feel. Therefore, I would say that's the number one issue that we agree, that the partners agree, and we finally get this permission to use the weapons, get the weapons, of course, and provided a very clear indication on European and Euro-Atlantic integration. Because obviously the major goal for Putin in this war is to prevent Ukraine from European and Euro-Atlantic integration. And since there's still no clear yes, especially with regards to NATO, then Putin has all the incentives to continue, because that just gives him sort of incentive to do so. His strategy so far has been successful. So unless we change that and provide a very clear answer to the NATO membership for Ukraine, this will continue.
Well, thank you, Vadim. Kajsa, given your experience as a former Minister of Defense in the Netherlands, what are, in your view, the key lessons learned from the recent security challenges? And if you take into account what Vadim just said, what are the biggest threats facing Europe in the next few years?
Well, first of all, let me say that I completely agree and understand all the issues raised. So both that we didn't react enough in 2014, and that we still we run into all kinds of practical and political difficulties in our support for Ukraine. So vocally, we're very strong on the support, but in practice, it is difficult. And I must say, as a former defense minister, I started in January 2022, so only weeks before the large-scale invasion. And I think the shock effect was really great. So that was good that we started working on bringing ammunition and weapons into Ukraine, and seeing also that Ukraine was extremely successful in defending itself, and that Russia miscalculated this whole invasion. And instead of a 3-day war and a victory parade, they are, after more than 950 days, still in this large-scale war. And they're suffering from it because it comes at a great cost also on the Russian side. So Ukraine is doing an incredible job. But Ukraine cannot do it without the support by its partners, European countries, and of course also the United States. And I think there you see the challenges. So you see that it takes a lot of effort by a lot of people, ministers, but also our industry, our military personnel, to provide Ukraine with what they need. For instance, the F-16s that are now flying in Ukraine, first it took a lot of convincing. And then once that we had the political approval, it took a lot of time to train. And of course, that is still ongoing. And there is no silver bullet, and the F-16 is also not a silver bullet. But I name it as an example of why you have to push and to push and to push, and to have the political will to continue to support Ukraine. And I think also, which is rightly said, this war is very difficult now for Ukraine. On the front, the Russian push is very, very hard. So the Ukrainians are suffering. So what needs to be done, and I think President Zelensky is trying to do that also now with his victory plan, is to change the dynamics of this war. The incursion in Kursk is an example of changing the dynamics, of showing what Ukraine is capable of doing. And I think that our task is to enable Ukraine to do that and do that more, and to change the calculus in the Kremlin, to show that we will remain there. We will remain by Ukraine. We will continue our support. We will increase the ammunition provided to Ukraine. We will make sure that Ukraine can defend itself in a way that Ukraine sees fit. And that is complying by international law, but hitting the enemy where they need to hit them. And thirdly, what I think is very important, I'm very impressed by the Ukraine defense industry. So they've been able to build a new defense industry, especially in the high-tech field, especially in the field of drones, every type of drone, not only the FPVs, but also the sea drones that they have used so successfully on the Black Sea, and all different types of drones, also very long range. And this is vital. This has changed warfare. And this is something where you see that not only the Ukrainian resolve, but also the Ukrainian creativity is in the end, I think, what will bring victory to Ukraine. But once again, only with our support. So what we should do, we should push hard for this, is a huge investment in this Ukrainian defense industry. And also connect our own industries to them. You have to be there if you are in the defense industry field now, because there, the equipment used, you know, it can be only 2 or 3 weeks from actually using a drone at the front, adapting the technique, and using the better version of it again. And when we look at our cycles of production, we're always talking about years. Well, that's not good enough anymore. So we are now in the position that we are learning from Ukraine. Ukraine is going to be the strongest country that has the strongest armed forces in Europe, which should become an invitee to NATO as soon as possible, as far as I'm concerned, and also this path to EU membership. They are part of our family, and that will enhance not only Ukraine's security, but certainly also our security.
Well, thanks a lot, Kajsa. Johan Persson, you are minister in a government at a time when Sweden officially joined NATO. And this, one should never forget, was a historical shift for a country that has a long tradition of neutrality. And I may add, it was one of the miscalculations of Putin that this happened at all, because the reaction was a strong upgrading, if you like, of the defense structure in the Baltic Sea. From your ministerial experience, how do you perceive the evolution of security in European countries, and are Europeans, after all, security conscious enough?
No, not enough. When I did my military service, we of course looked to the east. It was very obvious what we were training for. We were neutral in Sweden. For many years, we have deepened our collaboration and co-working with European partners, and of course within NATO as different partnerships. But of course it was the direct effect from the war, the Russian war against Ukraine, who changed this very quickly. At that time, two social democratic governments suddenly switched and said that they have been against NATO and the militarism and the war and the terror and the US and Vietnam or whatever. And suddenly, we have always been in favor of NATO. Very interesting, quick shift, but it was necessary, so I don't blame them. But now we're there, and we're trying to adopt to this new future and trying to be a strong partner in a strategic part of Europe, together with our European partners and the US and all members of NATO, of course. But we have to do much more, and I think we have to be honest in this room that we have to prepare for many years of struggle with Russia, even though we hope that it will be Ukraine will win and the Russian aggressor, Russian soldiers will leave the Ukrainian territory. But still, we have to be able to do more than talk about freedom. At these moments, we talk about freedom, our values, but we have to pay. We have to pay for freedom. There is no other way around it. Then it's complex, and we have to do other things also, with the climate change, etc. But we have to pay for freedom, and so we have to be prepared for that. And we're trying to do that right now in Sweden, integrate in the NATO security order, which is important. But on that side, we also, together with our European partners, also focus to deliver what we can for Ukraine, for war at sea, war at air, war on the ground, to defend our common freedom, but especially Ukrainian freedom, of course. And but there is a shift now. We have left the time for donations. It's time for productions, as you were talking about. And we are, God bless, in Sweden. We do have some strong industry producing weapons, nice to have in time of war, and we're trying to do everything to support that right now, because you need the hardware together with people in Ukraine to defeat Russia. And this is top of mind every day, not on, as the war has been on for such a long time now, and the brave Ukrainian people they fight so well on the agenda in everyday politics in Sweden. It tends to not be on the top of the agenda all the time, but when we meet with the National Security Board and the military command, this is the main focus, together with our integration with NATO, which will take a while, but so far so good, I would say.
Well, thanks a lot, Johan. Marie Agnes, you are member of the European Parliament. You are at the same time the chair of the Security and Defence Subcommittee of the European Parliament. you will soon interview the Lithuanian candidate for Defense and Space Commissioner. Can you give us your opinion on the Commission's plans for the EU Defense Union? Let me openly ask, is it good enough?
Okay, first of all, I have to say thank you very much to your country, to your people who are fighting a war, a terrible war now for nearly 1,000 days, and you are fighting not only for Ukraine, you are fighting for Europe, for all of our values, and every day I tell you, I say thank you very much for your brave, and we have to support 24 hours, and so that Ukraine has to win this war. Otherwise, it will be not the last war in Europe. And when you just said it, you started as Minister of Defense in the January of 22, and 1 month before I started to be the head of the Defense Committee in Germany, Bundestag, and 70 days later, Putin attacked a second time, never forget a second time, Ukraine, and so yes, I know what I'm talking about, and I traveled to the Ukraine shortly after this war, and I met many young people, a lot of women, because their husbands were in war, talking to them, and so what could Europe do? I mean, you just said it, Karl-Heinz, that of course for Europe it was the second attack after 2014 when nothing really reacted. I mean, a little bit la la la, well, that's it. And Europe did a lot, and it's really fantastic that Sweden and Finland joined NATO. This was really a moment when I was sitting in the German Bundestag to say, wow, this is really historical. So thank you very much. It was really a great move, and it was very important for NATO. But now we are in Europe, and you just said we will have for the first time a Commissioner of Security and Defense, and it's really a hard job because he has to create new ideas. Normally, if you become commissioner, you know what you are doing. I mean, you have to change a little bit this and this, but he has to start for the first time, and I'm very happy that with Andrius Kubilius, somebody will be there who knows what it means to have a border to Russia. And I mean, Lithuania is for us as Germans. We are close to Lithuania. We will build, we have many soldiers there, and we build up a brigade there, so we are very close. But for him, he will be responsible for security, and for sure he has to be responsible for a common procurement, because that's the thing, you just said it. Now, no donation anymore. We have to do a lot for Ukraine, but also for us, because it's not a war and suddenly it's gone. We will look for the next years, and everybody knows that the next 5, 6, 7 years, Putin will do everything to be ready to attack not only Ukraine, not only the East Ukraine, whole Ukraine, Georgia, Moldova, and you know, Armenia, whatever, he will do it. So the commissioner is the first thing. The second thing is that we will have our friend Kaja Kallas as High Representative. I was really, and I'm very often very critical with Ursula von der Leyen, I tell you the truth, but of course we are. But in this case, it was really a good choice, and we're looking forward because, I mean, she knows also what it means to have a border to Russia. And you know, Putin has a wanted list, and she's one of the first when he said this woman is really dangerous for Russia. And now Europe will have a commissioner or high representative for foreign policy. What a sign to say, for you it's an enemy, for us she will be a leader too. And I'm also very happy. She must match with the Commissioner of Security and Defense. They have to find a kind of organization. And the third one, it's Henna Virkkunen from Finland. As Vice President, she will be responsible for cybersecurity. We know that cybersecurity, I mean, we are in war. There's no doubt about it. We could see what happens all over. And so these are really three really good choice. Even she's from Finland. She knows it very well to have a huge border to Russia. So what could we do? And is first of all that we have to find a way, procurement, military mobility, space, cyber. I mean, there is a lot to do. And the thing is, I'm really new, like a girl in the first class, being now in the European Parliament. And I realized after a few weeks that everybody in the parliament wants to be very important and wants to have a good job. I mean, this is a normal in policy. But the thing is that we have no time for discussion who is responsible for, you know what I mean. There is no time for Ukraine and we have no time. So I'm looking forward that we will find a way, even that we are a subcommittee of the Committee of Foreign Policy. We just work that will be a full-fledged committee so that we can really work and to show Vladimir Putin that Europe realized what happens now. And I tell you the truth, I'm not a young woman anymore. I have children, I have grandchildren, and I do it for the generation, for the children who are now growing up. Because if we don't do anything, then this Europe, our liberal Europe, will definitely be, in a few years, totally different. And so it's not easy to be a liberal in these times. I mean, you know it better than me. And we have, last sentence, we have to explain the people, and I know what I'm talking about. Explain people. We have a huge discussion in Germany. In Germany, we did a lot, more than 35 billion euro for humanitarian, military, economic. But it's not enough. And we have to explain people that without security, we have no discussions about education, about culture, about the climate change. First of all, there will be the question of security. It's hard to explain, and people said to me, oh, I'm so tired. Ms. Strack-Zimmermann, I'm so tired, and the pictures from Ukraine, and I always say, come on, what you are talking about? You are tired, sitting in a nice room, there are no rockets, you could sleep very well. You are tired. I mean, Ukraine has reason to be tired, and they are not tired, and so it's reason for us to be really clear, and I hope we could change something in the next years in Europe.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Maria Agnes. Before opening to the floor, to the audience, let me pick out some issues which might be of particular importance. You know, there was a general argument, or you all four made it basically, we need more defense, we need more security. As a humble economist, I'm always wondering whether this is only a matter of money. We have the target of 2% of GDP. That may be enough, or it may be not enough, I don't know. But when I compare Europe, the European markets for defense equipment of all sorts, with America, I see on first glance huge inefficiencies, you know, huge opportunities to cooperate in projects, to specialize in particular. Think of Sweden. Sweden is a high-tech country with an excellent aircraft and specialized in some areas. We may be good at tanks in Germany, I don't know. But isn't there a huge scope for a stronger cooperation and within NATO, but also, because these are trade questions at the end of the day, can the European Union play a major role in this process of making defense production more efficient in Europe? Please, the defense minister.
It must. I think we have no choice. I think for too long we have accepted that we, in the European Union, we have an internal market for almost everything within the economy, except defense.
Yes.
Defense is still very national. And I understand it, because it touches the sovereignty of countries. It's about life and death. So I understand that side of it. But looking at the budgetary side, the 2% is not enough. I think we have to acknowledge that. It's not going to be enough. But at least we have to spend the 2% and hopefully later more wisely. and more efficiently. And that means that we have to create economies of scale. And that means that we have to do more joint procurement, and that we have to stop gold plating it from our national industry side or from our national parliament side. And I think there are great examples. Sweden produces a CV90, for instance. We have a user group, and the industry itself has said, okay, we can increase our production, we can double it, we can triple it, but only if we have one standard. Not if we have 14 different standards. And I think this is exactly the direction that we have to go in. We have to increase 155 ammunition production, but we have to make sure that these 155, that they fit all weapon systems that use 155. We discovered that we have the same Panzerhaubitzer, German, but they didn't fit in both of them. So we have to solve these issues that we've been aware of, also inside NATO for a very long time. But we have reached the limit of the acceptance of these issues. So I think we should create that European defense market. We do much more joint procurement. And that means that politicians have to make an effort, and that they will have to say no sometimes also to their own armed forces, and that they will have to create this economy of scale and these joint projects that will make us stronger. And I also agree with Marie-Agnès that we don't have so much time. So all our normal procedures, they're made for peacetime. Yeah, but we are not in peace now.
We're not in peace.
So we have to speed things up, and I have great hopes that under this new commission, that both the commissioners and the High Representative, but also the member states will have the same sense of urgency and really will take a step forward.
Yeah. Thank you.
Just
Marie-Agnès?
Absolutely. And I'm always optimistic. But yes, I'm from the area in Germany close to Netherlands.
Liberals
always optimistic.
Liberals are by birth optimistic.
Yeah, but the truth is, the question of industry, I mean, we are talking about really a lot of money. And industry already works together. I mean, absolutely. But we have to look for that we have, in a few years, we have a really strong European industry, because the truth is, without the United States now, and I would say in the future, we have no chance. But it's a chance now to become stronger, and we could do it only together. And so I hope that everybody is working in the European Parliament, also the new commissioner, that it's not a question of Germany, France, Netherlands, Sweden, whatever. It's not a question of one country. There's enough money to earn. I tell you, there's really enough to do for everybody. That we have not the nationalist view. We need really a European view, and it's not easy. I tell you the truth. I know what will come, but we are still going strong.
Johan?
I think it's obvious that we have to work more together, and that we should not only look into what the situation between Europe and the US or Canada, ask what do they have in resources from Russia and their friends of evil. Iran, China, North Korea, to mention some of them. How they use their proxy wars, how they produce ammunition. I mean, is it true that North Korea has the same amount of ammunition as the whole of Europe? How could this happen? Why didn't someone ask, is this reasonable? Now it's time to do it, and we have to change it. So we have to work together and take away the pure Swedish interest or the pure German interest. We have to find ways to boost the production for our security, because we have to deliver. We have to pay for freedom. I wish it wasn't that way, but that's the world we live in. So we have to act on the reality.
Yeah, Vadim, is this perspective of a common, let's say, a common defense industry, a really integrated industry, how do you see it for Ukraine? Ukraine has already stretched all muscles, if you like, that you can stretch at the moment. But might it not be extremely important to become part, economically speaking, of an intense division of labor with the West in weapons production?
Well, here I would first mention that we have very good experience already cooperating. For example, one of the aspects of Kursk operation and reason why it was successful was because we had very good program on developing the what do you call it, the drones and anti-air defense systems, the electronic warfare systems. There was a consortium, there is a consortium of countries, and this war has changed the way the wars are going because of how fast the situation changes. So, for example, this particular aspect with drones and the radio electronic devices was very well developed by that consortium, and we were able to do something that Russians did not expect. I mean, we overwhelmed them with the drones that they couldn't fight against. That was part of the reason why the operation went so quickly. And I talked to people who are in that consortium, and they said that it was amazing result for cooperation, how quickly they exchanged the information and how fast the decisions were made to build a drone that was capable of doing what they needed to do in that particular time. Also, in Ukraine now, we have a bit of different problem with the industry. Some industries produce some ammunition which they produce too much in terms of our army not being able to purchase it. So it's important for us also to look into this aspect, and it was discussed that we need to, we had the situation where one country said, okay, we have the money to buy the shells, the 155th caliber that we need, but it's only available if you buy it from us. It's also not, we don't have time for that. So we need to change these procedures, as was already mentioned, for the wartime procedures, and of course standardization. I totally support that. Our soldiers call what they have a zoo because of the variety. When you have, and your 155th caliber wouldn't fit into. If it's made in France for Caesar, it wouldn't fit into Panzer Haubitz, which is made in Germany. That's definitely making soldiers' job a lot more difficult. So this has to be accounted for. And like I said, we see in Ukraine in the last few months, just in the last few months, well, the Rheinmetall, Saab, several other big companies have announced that they're opening up offices, they're bringing in experts, and they starting very serious cooperation projects in Ukraine. So we're doing it now. It's just, it would be up to regulators also to do the things that we just discussed to help them do it faster.
Well, hybrid warfare, cyber attacks, disinformation, all the rest of it, it's the complexity of modern warfare and modern threats is now so intense. Do we need more civil-military cooperation in this respect? It looks, from an outside perspective, it looks at with an enormous dynamics. Modern warfare has changed in recent years, and we haven't kept step in the industrial structure. So is that another challenge?
If I can, I
please.
think it's definitely a challenge. I think what we're seeing in Ukraine, that is the combination between old-fashioned warfare, artillery, and the new techniques, the drones. But there is so much more happening. Ukraine knew also before 2022, it was constant under attack from cyber attacks. We also saw hybrid warfare, and if you look only at the surrounding countries, you mentioned Moldova, it is, the elections, the Russians are meddling in it constantly. They're bribing people. And in our own countries, in the European Union side of Europe, there is sabotage, cyber attacks, disinformation, So this is very, very serious, and we need a cooperation between all involved partners. And I think our intelligence service are, of course, very strong in that respect. But just recently in the Netherlands, there's been a big hack in our national police organization, where it is suspected that it is the Russians that are behind this hack, and they have stolen valuable information about a lot of policemen and women. So that is very dangerous for our societies. Yeah. So yes, the cooperation is vital with all European countries and also with American and other partners. And I think also the awareness of people is vital here. So people have to take this very seriously. And it is difficult to create this awareness because it is invisible. It doesn't directly affect you as a person, but it is there and it is a threat to our societies. And maybe as a final point, I would say also we are here in a gathering of liberal parties. And I think our adversary is illiberalism. And I think we have to be aware of that. We talk a lot about populists. But all these populist parties are illiberal. They're taking away our freedoms. Yeah. And many of them are connected to the Kremlin and to other autocrats that are feeding that sentiment in our societies, and it's dividing us. And I think that is also one of the biggest threats that we are facing. So while we have to focus, of course, on the hardware support for Ukraine, and must continue to do that, but we must raise the awareness of why this is a threat to the societies, that the type of societies that we want. We want freedom, we want democracy, we want rule of law, and all of that is threatened in various ways.
Yes, thank you. I may encourage you in the audience. Unfortunately, I can hardly see you from the panel here. But if you have a question, a comment, or whatever, please come down to the micro so that we see you and you get the word then, the floor. Please, Johan.
Of course, it's more than building the military traditional defense. Sweden has made a strange journey since the Second World War. We had a high level of civil defense awareness. We built Sweden in that way. And then with the German unification and the fall of the Soviet Union, we started to take this down. We now have to rebuild the civil defense in a broad way, including high standards on cyber security. I mean, we have to protect our universities, our key authorities better. And we have to fight the everyday, fight back the terror from these regimes who actually on a daily basis in Sweden more or less now, or it is too often, you can see how foreign countries, maybe Iran, I don't know, they use Swedish criminals to attack different targets in Sweden as their warriors. They have their own army. They don't only control Hamas, Houthi, or Hezbollah. They also control parts of the gang-orientated criminal organizations in Sweden. Yeah. They pay them to do things, and we see also that Russia all the time are very present, trying to do attacks, and we also have the organization driven from the state of China, who tries to also get influence and, of course, get so much information they can, which is not supposed to be in their hands. So you have to be alert on a broad way, in the broad perspective.
Yeah. Thank you. Maria Agnes?
The enemy is right in our society, in between. You know, they are already there. And it's not only people you are looking crazy and you thought, oh, come on, you have to be careful. No, they are there, and it's unbelievable that if you explain people you have to be careful, and they They couldn't understand that we are already in a kind of war. And I tell you the truth that I'm more anxious that the society will really have a problem. I mean, you could see it, what happens in Germany now. It's more frighten me than just in this moment to see a rocket. And so we have to be really alert that everything what happens in internet, we have to be, as Europeans, look what happens with TikTok. There are young people, 14, 15, 16, they have only information from TikTok. I mean, no newspaper, no books, no talking to somebody. And so they have a different view of this world. And it's not a question only of European. It's a question what happens in the United States. It's a question what happens in the Indo-Pacific. It's also a fact for us. So the whole world is on fire, and it's not easy to make politician decisions in these times, but I think that we have enough people who are strong enough to do it.
Yeah. We gradually have to come to an end, but Vadim, please.
Very short, in terms of information warfare instruments that Russia's been using, unfortunately very successfully. We have to give them the credit for that and actually start doing something about it. We see the efforts, but we understand it's difficult to simultaneously protect the freedom of speech, for example, and filter out Russian propaganda. What they have succeeded in is this concept of pushing through the facts are not important. Factuality doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what happened. Remember the MH17 plane that was shot down. And till this day, there are people in Europe who would say, oh, we heard Ukraine shut it down. Wasn't it the case? And how did it happen? Because of how successful Russians are in terms of delivering their messages, using the freedom of speech, using the media here in Europe. And we have developed good instruments to follow them. We know how they do it. We know which organizations they use for it. We know how the money comes and so on and so forth. So it's uniting our efforts in blocking their abilities to do that. And in terms of civil-military cooperation, Ukraine has so much to share experience in. We have a big delegation, and most of our delegation are women for many reasons. And you should hear the girls talk these days, about drones. And many of them make the drones with their own hands, the equipment that could be bought here and brought to the front line. So it's we really have the experience integrating the civil society, these connections that we have, and how to build these strong connections, and how to have society get prepared for, well, what's going on is we are in a war, literally, and Europe has to change in terms of society being aware of it better.
Well, thank you. Let's take the last 5 minutes that we still have to look back at Europe. There has been a big discussion over the last months and years about a stronger European pillar within NATO. And considering the ambition of this new Commission, how do you see the EU's role evolving within the NATO framework? And more specifically, what specific initiatives should be prioritized if you had to name some top priorities to ensure Europe can both complement and at the same time enhance the alliance defense capabilities? And I'll start with Johan, and let's go back.
We should start to see how we can enhance our cooperation in the cybersecurity. It's obvious. We should be put on serious targets on the way we get military equipment produced, and then we have to discuss how to do it in Europe. So you have to start with this, but also work very carefully to, at the same time, work with the countries mentioned, who could be on the way into, hopefully, the European Union, but they are under enormous pressure from especially Russia. So that's 3 priorities.
First of all, you need a strategy, and that's a problem. Europe has no strategy. We are always react. Something happens, and then we react. So it's not easy to compare it with history. But when the Americans, the United States decided to start it in the Second World War in 1941, they had a strategy. They worked for a strategy, and it was effect 2 years later. Otherwise, the Second World War wouldn't stop. So we now have to create a strategy, and then we have to stop, discussion, and then we have to go forward. And I think it's a question of the members of the parliament, the members of commission. It's an absolutely job for Ursula von der Leyen. She is very, she knows what she is talking about. She was for 6 years, 7 years. She was the defense, she was Minister of Defense. And so I think that's it. Don't talk, do something, and we have to find a way. Otherwise, we have a problem.
Europe needs to reform in order to be able to digest, so to speak, accept new members. And this new wave of new European countries becoming European members of the European Union is a chance for the European Union itself to reform. I mean, now we have the situation where one country can block extremely important decisions, security decisions for Ukraine and for Europe in general has to be changed. So this is our chance, and this is work for the Parliament and for the Commission, and we're very hopeful that this new convocation for the Parliament, the new Commission, are going to get very serious about it and resolve this issue.
Thank you. Kajsa, the Minister of Defense, has the last word.
Well, I would say, and I'm also an optimist by nature, but I think we have to prepare for worst case scenarios, and we have to have a scenario. And adding to all the threats, we also, of course, have the American elections looming over us. And we still have to take into consideration that we could have a new Trump administration, and that will bring unpredictability to Europe. And I think that is a serious problem. And if you ask me now, is Europe ready for this situation? I would say we're not. Yeah. But we have to be. And that's why we need to have a strategy that, of course, involves NATO, because NATO is for our collective defense, and we have to invest everything in making that better. And NATO is 32 countries since Sweden has joined. And NATO has the same issue that the EU has with reluctant allies and members. And it's sometimes difficult to persuade them, but we have to focus very much on that. And I think also we have to be very concrete and setting priorities. And we know that air defense is one of those priorities. And we're talking about the European Sky Shield. I think that is very good, but we have to make it concrete. So that has to be one of the steps that the new Commission sets. In conjunction, of course, with NATO, because I think we should stop thinking about NATO and EU competing. We have to think about how NATO and how EU can strengthen NATO, and I think there are various possibilities to work on for the European Commission, but then we have to let go of that idea that we used to have, that NATO thinks EU should not meddle in security affairs, and that the EU and certain countries within the EU are hesitant when it comes to NATO. And all of that with a great sense of urgency.
Well, thanks a lot. Let me summarize in a few sentences the basic message. The basic message is, first of all, optimism is not enough. We are all optimists, thanks God, as liberals. But, once in a while, history makes jumps which require a completely new recognition of reality. By the way, former wars, think of the First World War, with the dominance of the defensive. Yeah. Think of the Second World War with the dominance of the offensive. And every wave of wars brings, together with the new technologies, brings absolutely new insights. Apart from the wickedness of some forces in the world, the insights are that the new technologies, and today it's the cyber, the huge cyberspace, the role of the cyberspace, and the role of new defensive weapons, which very much depend on digital technology. This is a new world. And this new world may require some sort of and will require some sort of coordinated action and, if you like, technology policy in the good sense on the European level with a lot of cooperation and opening of markets. So I learned a lot, I have to admit, as a humble economist in this hour. Thank you very much for discussing these absolutely complex issues on this panel, and I'm looking forward to the further discussion within ALDE and within other liberal organizations. Thank you very much, and thank you for listening and applauding.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Please. Yeah, take the second. Take this one. As you wish. So, a very warm welcome from me to the audience. Thank you so much for attending this debate on what is the lesson we can learn from the election which has just been. I would like to say a very warm welcome to the panel. Thank you very much for taking your time to meet with us and have this debate. First of all, welcome to you, Xavier Bettel, to Valérie Ayé, to Michel Simeke, and to you have such a long name.
Yes.
Cotrine de Figueiredo.
You did it very well.
Was it okay?
That was perfect. My mother would have...
Say welcome to them. Thank you.
We have all been through an election campaign, and there has been successes and there has been challenges, and we have had a lot of issues to debate, and it has sometimes maybe also been difficult to discuss the different things and come up against the populistic point of views and be sure to present the liberal values. And what we are going to do in this next hour is to analyze what happened, what were the good things to do, what is the lesson we can learn from one another so that we can inspire us, that we can get this inspiration from the different parties and the different campaigns. And really, all of you in the audience, feel free to come up with questions or comments on what is being said. Let's start, but first of all, you have such impressive CVs, all of you, and we know you. But I would like to start asking you, are there something else we ought to know about you? Do you have some secrets which you would like to share with us today to give us all a better knowledge and impression of you? Valerie.
Hello again, everybody. I don't know if I can speak about a secret, but maybe an information. Before being a proud member of En Marche, the political party created by Emmanuel Macron, I was already elected at the national level, already engaged in politics, and I was a member of a political party which is named UDI. And UDI is a member of the ALDE party.
Yeah.
So I was not at that time a member of the ALDE party. I'm still not a member of the ALDE party, but maybe my destiny is to be a member of the ALDE party.
Thank you. Michael?
Thank you very much, and thanks for inviting me to be part of this panel. It's quite an honor. In terms of secrets, I think the one secret that only my friends know, or my family, is that I shouldn't have been a politician. I shouldn't have even studied these things at university. I should have been a football player. And there was a moment when I was 14, 15, where all my life was geared up to be a professional football player.
What position?
Forward. First defense midfielder and then forward. And then there was an injury, which then set me on course to do something completely different. But in an alternative life, I would now be a failed football player playing in, third or fourth league in Austria, perhaps, or something.
Thank you. Xavier?
I played a lot of football when I was young, and they always put me in the goal. And I didn't know why I was always in the goal. And I asked the football players why I was always in the goal, and they say, there you disturb the less. Voilà, so you see, so I never had the football career in mind, because I think it was in the interest of the football. No, maybe if it's a secret, you don't tell it, because then it's not anymore a secret. But one thing a lot of people knows in Luxembourg, but you don't know, I decided to start politics when I was 9 years old, because the mayor was visiting my playground, my school, and we had no playground. And I decided to organize a demonstration. So we drew and we did a petition. We didn't know how to sign, but so it was Xavier. And so I gave to the mayor a petition and I said, we want a playground. And she said, this is politics, so if you ask something, we will build a playground. And we got a playground when I was 10 years old, so I was so proud when we opened the playground, and the mayor was there. And so I decided I once want to be mayor to build playgrounds. And I became mayor and I built playgrounds, but I did also other stuff. But so that's how I decided to start politics, to realize that complaining is easy, but to do things, it's harder, but it's more efficient.
And the playground is there still?
There is still a playground, but they still didn't name it on my name, but because I heard that usually things are named when you're not anymore there, so they have time.
But the playground is there. And you?
Yes, I think I'll say this for the very first time in public. You're looking at the treasurer of the Portuguese Curling Federation. Which is amazing, considering I don't think anybody plays curling in Portugal. Now, I can leave why this came to happen as a mystery, and I can explain it. It's probably best to leave it a mystery.
Well, thank you, all of you. Let's take a round now on what you think are the most significant results from the campaign we have just been through. What are the most important issues you have been aware of? Should we start?
It's a fact that we are not happy about the result. It's a fact. We have to see the reality in fact, and we see that there are waves. The last European elections, the extreme right were in some countries not that strong that they are now. We have new situations because we knew in Hungary, for example, they were always very strong, the very conservative ones. But now, for example, in Italy with Giorgia Meloni, their first party, in Holland with Geert Wilders, their first party, in Austria with Kickl, their first party, in France, last elections with Bardella, their first party. You see here Chega is strong, you see Vox is strong, you see in the Nordic countries, populist parties are very strong. So they are still divided between the extreme rights and the very conservative rights. But imagine if they would go merge together, the ECR and these, I don't know the name now, of patriots. But if they go together, all of them, they could be the biggest group, I think, in the European Parliament, or the second biggest group, but close to it. I don't have the figures. So the biggest lesson is we should not blame the electors, because that's always what we have. They do wrong, they didn't understand. We should not blame them, but we should listen to them. And as I said just before, for example, a lot of them about the migration crisis, they tell you, yes, we need to close, and that's national reflex, we close the borders. We see, for example, now Germany decided to close the borders, so a bit to destroy Schengen, instead of telling we should put everything together to have the external borders functioning. And having a migration politics where it's, I'm sorry to say, but it's not on the migrant to decide where he will go, but on the European Union to do solidarity and to do the distribution and everything. And it's not a shame to speak about that topic. And if we don't speak and if we don't take serious the fears of our electors, the extreme rights might get even stronger in future. So it's important to speak about security, about migration, about jobs, about environment, about housing, all those topics, but not to blame them and to take them serious, to listen to them, and trying to find alternatives, but realistic alternatives, because, as I just said in the panel before, the difference between us and the populists is the populists, they have to the most complicated questions the shortest answer, and we have to the easiest questions the most longest answer. And that makes a difference, but at the end we need to say what is fake, what is not right, and to demonstrate and not to change and not to try to adapt our speeches because we think it's more popular. Because this is very short term. To follow the populist, it's a lose-lose situation for us, and we have to know it. It's good just maybe for the next few weeks, or just that people say, you know, it's not the likes on Facebook who will make you to rule a country or not. So stay to your values. Fight for it, but explain, and if you're not re-elected, at least you didn't give up for what you fight for. I think it's important to keep it. And people, I'm now 11 years in government, and I never changed my DNA. And the day I feel that I would need to change my DNA, then I prefer to stop politics and maybe going to build playgrounds.
Indeed, I share Xavier's views on the fact that, of course, the rise of far right we see it everywhere in Europe. I could say also, if you look at the USA, for example, and the polarization of the US also, and we know it more and more on our continent. And indeed, we should not run after the far right. It doesn't mean that we should put on the side the issues that are important for their voters. If you look at the migration on other issues, of course, this is important. But when we see some conservative parts of the EPP, especially, who runs more and more after the far right and endorse far right proposals, no, we should not go in that direction. We should identify the problem and continue to have our own response to this problem of competitiveness, migration, inflation, and so on. So this is our DNA, our core DNA, and we should continue with that. The issue is how to communicate. We have a lot of discussion with Joao, and we will continue to discuss within the group to analyze the result of the election and to see how we can better speak to our voters, but to all the voters, to gain voters, to be closer to to their concerns, and to be more efficient in the way we communicate. If you look at the figures in the European Parliament, it's not easy, if I can state, to have a clear-cut evaluation. We lost 24 seats, 17 if you remove ANO, which was not only when they leave, they were not anymore a liberal party. I think we can agree on that. And we had different results considering the countries. For example, we did very well in small and middle countries and in the Nordic countries, and we had quite bad or disappointed results in big country and in South country, except from Portugal, where you managed to have a very good result. Yes, small country, but South country too. And congrats for that. And if you look again at the figures, there are the six biggest countries in Europe: France, Germany, Spain, Italy, Poland, Romania. Concretely speaking, it represents 400 MEPs over 720. And on the 400 MEP, we have 23 from the Renew. So it means two things. First, that middle and middle-sized delegations matter, especially in the group, but also that we are weak. We are too weak in the biggest country, and probably we have to reinforce our presence in those big country. Having said that, of course, we have our Renew identity and DNA, and during the campaign we had this common campaign, but we should be more efficient in the next campaign, and also, of course, go on the ground and let our party national leadership to identify what is the best way to speak to our voters. So and to give liberty, of course, of our campaigners to speak to our voters, to see what's better, which issues are the most important and efficient to speak to them, how to speak to them, and yes, give liberty as long as they respect as long as our core DNA is respected, and as long as nothing hurt our sister party in the other countries.
Thank you. Johan?
Yes, I'll say this in such a clear way to make you look away from your phones. The results were bad. We lost 25% of the seats. We went from number 3 to number 5 in terms of size in the European Parliament. And what's worse, we represented close to 15% of the seats in the former Parliament. We represent a little over 10% now. So the question is, we all believe, I hope, in this room, we have the best political ideas in the world, right? Liberals have the best political ideas in the world, and they're worth 10% of the European Parliament. This doesn't match. So either the ideas are not so good and we have to change them, or there's something wrong in the translation and the perception of those ideas by the people. I personally, and I hope all of you, I'm not willing to change my ideas. I still believe they are the best in the world. So it's the translation part that has to change. Now, what is the translation? Valerie was talking about maybe the messages were wrong. Maybe we now recognize that the so-called kitchen table issues were not too central in our campaign. Perhaps here or there we went easily into what is known as woke territory. Perhaps we took the eye off the ball of the main things that made the European Union great, namely the ability to promote the personal freedoms, the prosperity that is now lacking. That is also maybe the case. But what I'm sure is that the perception of liberalism and of liberal parties in Europe is not the one it should be. Why? I've been talking to a lot of people not connected to us to get the full idea, journalists, political opponents, observants. They think we are old, they think we are tired, they think we are too rational, that we think being right is enough. We don't appeal to people's emotions, we don't appear to be caring about their problems. We take pride in being seen as moderate, centrist, able to compromise, so we don't really stand for something. And we are seen as divided. And I think the divided part is a consequence of all the rest, and not, it's just a symptom of something else. To put this in a more, perhaps, action-oriented way, we are unexciting. We are not inspirational. And let me use this word, I think it maybe wake you up. We are not sexy. I looked at the results of the ALDE parties in the last election, and Valerie is absolutely right. Those that did fairly well are NEOS in Austria, the Mouvement Réformateur in Belgium, the Freedom Party in Lithuania, us in Portugal, and the Progressive Slovakia in Slovakia. And we gained 1, 2, 3 seats, so 8 seats in the ALDE parties within Renew. And the ones where we lost, Ensemble in France lost 10 seats, Ciudadanos lost 7, the USR in Romania lost 6, FDP in Germany, they lost 2, doesn't appear very much, but they weren't that strong to start with. So we have 25 losses on this, 8 gains on the other side. And you look for a common denominator. And yes, the first distinction is between small and medium countries versus large countries, and we have a problem in large countries, and we'll never be able to grow as a group if we don't do a lot of political work in large countries. But if you look at the data foundations of the parties in the smaller countries that I just mentioned, let you know, NEOS formed 2014, Mouvement Réformateur, well, it's a derivative of a very old party, but in the present configuration, it's 2002. Freedom Party, 2019, Initiativa Liberal, us, 2017, Progressive Slovakia, 2017. So younger parties did much better than older parties. Why? Because they appear fresh, they appear new, and for that, they were able to inspire. And part of the perception is, of course, created by what we're talking here, which is communication. How are our ideas getting to the people? What spokespersons are we using? What channels are we using? What tone are we using? And I was told, I'm in politics for a very long time, 5 years. This was a joke, by the way. And the first thing somebody told me when I got into politics is that communication is 90% of politics. It's wrong. It's more than that. If people don't know what you're doing, and they don't know what you're doing in the right way, your political actions are worth nothing. If you want to attract people, you want to be sexy in this sense, this is not just a catchword, because the analogy is perfect. You have to attract people. You have to convince them that what you're trying to do is also something they want to do with you, if you know what I mean. So to do that, you have to communicate in an attractive way, a fresh way, and on matters that people are really concerned about, in a way that they feel sort of part of the equation, part of the solution. So we liberals, we have the best ideas. We can be optimistic that our ideas are the ones that are going to solve their problems. We just have to make people believe that. And be, altogether, sexy. Nobody said it, but we could try it again later.
Michel?
Thank you so much. I'm going to disagree a bit on the assessment of the elections. And from the perspective of my party and my country, I can't quite say that the elections were a disappointment, because we have won the European elections in my country with a number of seats higher than any other political party ever scored in the European elections. And also, when you add up the numbers in the European Parliament, of course it's less than the previous mandate. I was an MEP in the previous mandate, but that in itself was an aberration. My understanding is that 80 seats was a very good result when ALDE was in Parliament the previous mandates. So you could also see the glass as half full, so that it's a return to some average or normal that was there. But of course, what's new is and you've all talked about it, is the rise of the far right and their strength in the European Parliament. And my sense is that for us and for Valerie and all the MEPs in the European Parliament now, the task is to do whatever you can to contain the far right, make sure that they don't take over policy making in the European Union. But that in itself is not enough, and Xavier was very right on that, that cannot be the basis of our future campaign. And I don't know how to be more sexy or how to have better messaging. I'm not an expert in political communication. We have very good people to do that and to think about that. My 2 cents would be that we should perhaps look at what's happening in the US and how the Democratic Party is approaching the elections and the campaign of Kamala Harris. And I've seen that in Slovakia, that for a lot of people, the arguments of the far right, or in our case of the government of Mr. Fico, are attractive, but not because they offer some hope for a better future. They're attractive because they're angry. And because the government, and this is, I think, similar for other far-right populists, they're apocalyptic in their language about Europe, that Europe is over and we're going to be run over by waves of migration, or the Ukraine's cause is lost and everything is going to hell. And I think what we need to find is a way to be hopeful about the future, to, as Kamala Harris would say, to bring some joy to the campaign, to restore people's faith that there is a better future. I remember our Prime Minister, Mr. Fico, has just said last week that when he was introducing budget cuts, because they're needed given the deficit and the debt, he said things won't get better. And I was staring in amazement. How could a Prime Minister say such a thing? But the far right in the European Parliament are saying pretty much the same. Things won't get better. They're only going to get worse for Europe. And I think we should get on the other side of that argument. And pretty much as Emmanuel Macron was starting his campaign in 2017, he was pitching us, progressives, liberals, as representing the future versus the populists representing the past. And I think we should somehow get back to that dichotomy for the next campaign for the European elections.
So you are talking in different way about shorter answers, a better communication to the voter. We should be more fresh and have more energy, and we have to show hope and joyfulness and that there's a future to come. How are we going to do this? What are your possibilities in the positions which you have? Could the governments where Liberal takes part, could they do more, Xavier?
Yes.
How?
You said I should have short answers, so...
that was your proposal.
No, the first thing is, as a politician, is to listen. The problem is very often when you are elected, and I realized that when I was Prime Minister, that you live, I don't want to say that you live in the Ivory Coast, but government isolates you. You are with your councillors, but you have less time. It's not a choice, but you have less time to be with the people. Also with friends, and this was something I always try to organize, that I have time also to see my friends, because at the end of a term as a minister, you will be happy to still have some friends, because you have less time for them. And so it's important to listen to the people. And for example, I have a stupid example, but during the COVID period, we had a discussion in my government if we should allow people to have guests for Christmas. And I asked the cabinet, and all the cabinet say, yes, we should, this is so terrible to say that no family and the grandparents and etc., etc. And then in the evening when I came home, I said to my husband, tomorrow I have a press conference, and we will explain that for Christmas it will be not 2, but it will be 8, and for New Year's Eve it will be 8, and it won't be 11 o'clock, but it will be 2 o'clock. And my husband told me, you are explaining to people since 4 months that they should avoid contacts, and you will allow for Christmas that they come together with the grandparents who are the weakest one, who might be sick and who risk to die. How do you want to tell to people that the virus will be gone for Christmas and for New Year's Eve? And then everybody around me told me to do it. But then the next day I went back, I asked the colleagues of the government, I told them, I won't say that. We need to stick to these rules, and etc., etc. So I listened to someone from the outside, even it was my husband, but just to be out of your ivory tower. So that's the first thing, to listen. Then to take decisions. If we're elected, it's not just to watch and see. It's also to take decisions, to say yes or no, and not maybe. We have to take responsibilities. But first to listen, then to take responsibilities, and then not to think that it's granted, because we take the decisions that everybody understands what we mean. So to take also the time to explain to people, to our electors, but also to the people, why we took these decisions. As a prime minister and as a party, we have tendencies usually to discover the people just before the elections. And so we have these, these local meetings, the regional meetings where we go to have an exchange with the people. When I was a mayor, I had every week my office open on Tuesday during an hour where people without an appointment can come just to speak to you. And this is something that very often we miss when we are. In opposition, we do it. But as soon as we are in the majority, we have no time, and then security reasons, and et cetera, et cetera. And I think these are the small things, not to forget where we come from, to know that the power is not ours, it's trust, which is ours that we've got from the people, that we should not disappoint them. And to be honest, and sometimes at the beginning of my second term, I had to raise taxes. No, or first term, I had to raise taxes. And people said, you will never be elected. But I explained to people why. And I was re-elected 5 years later as a prime minister. So for me, it's to explain. To explain. And we should not think that because we think it's good that everybody will consider that it's good, to take time and to listen also to the people, not to make polls about everything, but to get out of our ivory tower. Because believe me, responsibility isolates you. You don't have the same contact with people than we, and especially you have people around you, they all say, oh, you're always right. I said to Emmanuel Macron, and he told me, I have spoken about this, and they all agree. I said, they're paid to make compliments. They're paid to make compliments to you. Nobody will dare to say, no, Mr. President, you're wrong. So it's important to know that we have very often, when you are in government, so many new friends and friend requests on Facebook, then the day you leave the government will disappear. Never forget that.
Valerie, how can ALDE support the work you do in Renew? Can we be closer together? Can we be more united, as you also mentioned, and thereby strengthen your position?
Of course, we can, and we should, and we can, and we must be closer and closer. One of the first press conferences I took part just after having been elected president of the group in January. I had lots of journalists in front of me. Several asked me, why is Renew so divided? I said, please look at our votes and look at EPP's votes. We have the same level of cohesion. So what's wrong? What are you asking me, president of the Renew Group, about our division? And when are you asking Manfred Weber about EPP's division? So why are they asking us? Indeed, because we have three components within the Renew family, the Renew Group. And it's not the case in the other, if you look at the Socialist and the EPP group. But having three components, even if I think that we should move towards one unique component, but having three components doesn't mean that we are divided. Of course, we have different sensitivities within the group, which are sometimes strong deviations, I must say. I'm looking to Morten, for example. If you look at budgetary or fiscal issues, we are not, my French position is not exactly Danish Morten positions. Yes, but we should all be around the table, and that's the way we work together, to stick on what unites us. And we have a lot that unites us, our core DNA, the rule of law, the competitiveness, and I could list a lot of things. So we have strong identity, strong DNA. We are recognized within the European Parliament also for being a constructive group, and I think we should continue to do that. Maybe we'll speak later about the EPP's positions and the trend to be more and more closer and closer to the more conservative part of the European Parliament, not to speak about the far right, and we will have to define a strategy against this. But yes, we are closer than people want to say, but we should be closer and closer. And of course, ALDE component within the Renew group is a very strong and important component, and we work all together. So let's continue. Of course, Renew is a force, is the strong force in the European Parliament. Of course, we are the 5th group now, but we are key with for this central coalition with EPP, SD, and Renew and the Greens eventually if they join.
You are new not only in the European Parliament but also in the Renew group. How has it been to start?
Well, I think Valerie could answer better than I, because we've been, as Valerie said, talking a lot about what needed to change, and it's a bit follow-up answer to the previous questions you made to Javier and Valerie. And it's been difficult because the way we used to operate our party here is very different the way any European party would operate, and specifically the way the liberals parties have been operating in general a bit throughout there's a short answer to what should we do, which well, we have to idealize, conceptualize things, and then you have to execute them. Two different realities. When you're thinking about things, you have to allow yourself to be chaotic, creative, test a lot of silly ideas. And then when you execute them, you have to be very disciplined and respect what you decided in the first phase. And as far as political communication goes, you only have to answer 5 questions. They appear easy. Is what you should communicate, choose the topics, the messages. Where you should communicate them, you choose the channels which reach your target audience. When you should communicate them, because timing in politics is very important. Who should communicate them, because people have to be credible when transmitting certain messages. And then how you should communicate, the tone, the optimism we were talking about, the confidence, the freshness, the sexiness, how you should communicate. So you decide on these things, and I agree with Javier, you can't decide this within the inner circle of your advisors. You have to get out of your ivory tower, but it's not just your friends. I mean, you're a very popular guy, but you don't have more than 200 friends. And that's nothing as far as electoral base is concerned. To use the broader sense of friends, poll them. ALDE has a fantastic research department. There's been fantastic panels on electoral data here this weekend. How many of you have been there? It's crucial to use data, to know what people are worried about, to know how they consume information, where they go. Absolutely crucial. Use that, the broad sense of friends, to establish your strategy. And then be extremely disciplined in executing. And when we have very diverse groups, the only way to be disciplined is not to wait for unanimity or very large consensus, but once you're sure that you have the critical mass, you go. It's called leadership. You go, you take a risk. Because if you're right, people will follow you. And they will not follow you very long after. They will follow very, very soon. But you have to decide and be convinced about what you're trying to do, and do it. Okay? It's like the Nike slogan, just do it.
You make it sound quite easy.
Yes, it's easy to say, much more difficult to do.
Yeah. Michelle, what are your thoughts? Can your party inspire others in the region and thereby strengthen the liberal values in that part of Europe?
I sure hope so. But before I get into that, I wanted to support what Valerie was saying about the need to, be able to work together despite whatever differences on these, fiscal or whatever issues there might be. I really think, and this is my 4th Congress or 3rd, and we've been as a party first as observers, and now we're becoming more active in ALDE, but my sense was always that even I don't understand the different party configurations within the liberal sphere. I mean, I'm getting lost in it, and how can we ask, voters to orientate themselves in that? I mean, what's the group, what's the constituent parts, and what's ALDE? I think definitely one of the tasks of the new ALDE leadership, but also of Valerie and the group, is to, simplify it all, to make sense of it, to put it all somehow together. And I know that there have been efforts, and I know that it's going to be not easy. But if we can do that in the group, and I was part of a 100 member strong group before in the European Parliament, where there were people from different, coming from different national backgrounds, perspectives, and it worked well. So I'm convinced that under Valerie's leadership in the group and the new leadership here, that we could do that and overcome that fragmentation. Now, as for our party, in a way, it is a similar story. That Progressive Slovakia is a party which has people who are on some issues on the right, on some issues on the left, but they're liberal. And this is also what helped us grow, that to attract new and new voters, because we had a disciplined message that's coming to what you've been saying. We ran a good, optimistic, positive campaign. The slogan of our national campaign was, vote for the future. And that despite the fact that we came from different original backgrounds, or different political sides, that we also show to the voters that a party like this can work together and can be united. And we're continuing to do that, continuing to rise in opinion polls precisely because of that, of our ability to speak with one voice, despite the fact that people might have internal disagreements. And whether that's transferable, whether we can leverage that beyond Slovakia, I'm pretty sure what we can do and should do is to work with like-minded liberal partners, and we have been doing that, but we should do more of that in the Czech Republic, of course in Hungary, in Poland, because the other guys are doing it. That, you have Prime Minister Fico huddling with Mr. Orban and Mr. Babiš, and some of the Polish politicians, now the Austrian far-right party. So there is a network that has emerged, and I think it's incumbent on us to create something similar on our side, and for it to be a strong pillar of ALDE, and then perhaps something that will emerge later on. But I'm absolutely convinced that, and we're already doing that, transferring lessons, talking about our respective situations. And for the moment, we need to do that also because Central Europe otherwise will be left to the likes of Mr. Orban and Mr. Fico. And so we're in this together, at least in our region.
Thank you very much. I've been trying to keep an eye on you out there, but I haven't seen anyone who wishes to take the floor. No? Joa, I saw you nodding to what Michel was just saying about the networking and trying to look around and see who is there of like-minded. Should we do more of that?
Yes, because we should pay a lot of attention to political strategies that have worked. And Progressive Slovakia has done a tremendous job. I forgot to congratulate you when I was mentioning that you won 3 seats vis-à-vis the last term. Well done, kudos. And we should learn from you. And that type of attitude is exactly the one we should have. Be humble, that we can learn from what others are doing. And if the far right is coordinating between different parties in different countries, we should try to do the same. And this is the perfect forum to do it. We even have a structure, which they don't have yet, of a sort of European, pan-European party. And we don't just preach this, we practice this. In the European election in Portugal, what we've done is we looked at the rise of the far right in the previous general election and said, what are they doing that is working? Many of the things that they were doing, we were not willing to copy or to emulate, like having a very authoritarian leadership, choosing populist themes, being totally hysterical in the way you communicate. Those things we would not do. But we did something that we hadn't done so far, and I'm at ease to talk about it because we didn't do it because of me, because I was against using TikTok. I was afraid of the Chinese, and I always refused to personalize and have faces on billboards until then. But these were 2 things that worked for the far right. It was 2 things that we did for the first time. Not very comfortable for the candidate, but it worked very well. We almost doubled our percentage. So let's learn about the other things, what the other guys are doing well. And it's the The most honest form of flattery is to copy what others have done, and we should do that, whatever works. And Slovakia has a lot of things to teach us in that respect. Let's not be afraid of those. We have to try new things, because the one thing I'm sure is that what we're doing now is not working.
I want to add something that very often our parties, and I don't want again to be misunderstood, we don't have these deep roots party, like Christian Democrats or socialists, where the people were socialists from parents to grandparents to grandparents, or this traditional Catholic church conservatives that you had in a lot of countries. And they are very humble. If you look, for example, Joao or Michal, because Joao was, his party is doing 5% in the last European elections, he was close to 10%. Michal's party started from the scratch. He's for the first or second party, it's a race, neck-on-neck race. So what is very often in our parties is linked also to some leaders. And I'm sorry to say, some parties, liberal parties, were very strong with some leaders, but disappeared also with the leaders. So it's, if you look, Ciudadanos in Spain, and I could quote tens of parties. So it is, we don't have this, very often we are able to fill a gap without being populist. And that's the difference. That people who are not too right-wing, not too left-wing, and who wants to something in the middle, where they have, I say always, the heart on the left side, but the wallet on the right side, they feel well in our political family, or because the leader is charismatic, and that's, you know, you don't become in Slovakia first party, or if Michal wouldn't be that charismatic. So I'm sorry for, no, I know you're too humble. No, but this is right, and this is something other parties doesn't have. You see, for example, if you look Angela Merkel. And now Friedrich Merz. Friedrich Merz in the polls is very strong, but he has not the charisma, I'm sorry for Friedrich Merz, but like Angela. But they have already 25% before they opened the polls. Before they started, they will be always over 20%. We as liberal, it is not very common. For if you look the figures, it was Holland and Belgium, and then in the French-speaking. But it can change very fast. Christian Democratic parties, for example, in Belgium, they were always over 30%. They are now at 10%. So times are changing, but in our party, if you look the history of our parties, with the liberals, sometimes they get protest voters in some countries, so they are very happy when they reach 10%. And in some other parties, if they're able to have a charismatic leader, they can come to 20–25%. But when you start from the scratch, it's a time. When you start with 0.9 and you come to 9% in 7 years, when you come from 0 to 20 to 22%, Emmanuel starts from the scratch with En Marche. He's president twice, but it's also Emmanuel's charismatic. It's also because of Emmanuel. So we are very often also depending on the leading figure. That doesn't happen with socialists, where people vote socialist wherever they are, or for the conservatives, they will vote wherever there is. We are more sometimes dependent also on who's the leader.
You wanted a comment?
Just wanted to add to that it's just as important to be able to design, if it's a new party, to design it in a way that it's going to survive no matter who the leader is. And that sometimes is a problem as well for new parties. Sure. Also on our spectrum. And what I'm proud of is that Progressive Slovakia is a party which, I'm its fourth leader in 7 years. And that's a good thing. I'm not saying that that's something to whine about. That's actually a good thing that the party was rising steadily despite changing leadership. And it should stay that way. I mean, I would feel that my job is done only after I'm sure that even if there's a new leader, the party will stay strong.
Your party. You are still the face of your party in your country.
Sorry?
You are still the face of your party in your country?
Yeah, but that's, you know, for the moment. What we must make sure, and these are the lessons from some of our partner countries and partner parties, that is that regardless of what happens at the top or in terms of personnel, the party stays strong because it has, in the meantime, created structures and has roots in the society, or has managed to do that over time, and that people understand why they're voting for it, understand what the values are, understand what the program is and what the sense of future is, because otherwise the risk of the kind of situation that you're describing is that the party will then fall down once one particular leader steps down or is not re-elected. So just to comment on that should we make sure of that, and our party is an example of that we can change leaders without it disturbing the trajectory. And one final thing, and this is what you said at the very beginning in your intervention, and I want to stress that when we started, people said a liberal progressive party can never be popular in a conservative country. Slovakia is a conservative country. There is not enough support, never been in parliament for, even when you talk about equality, even civil partnerships. And they told us that, a progressive party like this could never have 5% or 10%. And now we have 20. But we still do have not just civil partnerships, but same-sex marriage in our electoral manifesto. And people are like, you shouldn't do that because you could never win elections that way. But I think what you said at the beginning, that we should, stick to what we believe in. And I think that has actually worked to our advantage. That people saw that we didn't retreat, we didn't fumble. We said, this is what we believe in. We also offer other things, but this is what we believe in. And despite that, we were able to get a strong result. And I think that's also a lesson for me for the future, that, this is what you believe in, don't shy away from it.
Thank you. And now we got a voice from the audience, please.
Thank you very much for your enlightenment. Don't you think that last European election were actually 27 national elections, which means and which can explain the different results from our parties? And in order to prepare the next one in 2029, don't you think that we should have our members and supporters of the different Renew ALDE parties in the different member states to know each other and to work together in order to have a more European matters-oriented election next time?
What a nice question and comment for our last round, just so you know.
I will be short, but it's just a problem. For example, the leading candidates. If you ask who is Nicolas Schmitt, I know him, he's from Luxembourg. But who else knew Nicolas Schmitt? Strack-Zimmermann, I know her because she's a neighboring country. She was our candidate. But ask in Portugal if someone knows Strack-Zimmermann. So if we really want to have a European spirit and also collaboration, I ask, and my wish would be that for the next European elections, we would have a list with 27 ALDE candidates from 27 different countries in the 27 states, so that we have European lists where the Spitzenkandidat from this list will be the first one which will be asked to form a commission in front of the European Parliament. Then we will have European parties, then we will have a European list, then we have European candidates, and we will be able all to find one of our candidates on this list. This is a transnational list. I know that a lot of candidates are against, a lot of parties are against, but this would be really a fact where we would have a European campaign with European parties coming together, and not, in fact, a list where very often you vote against the national politics. Because in a lot of countries, European elections is the moment where you say, I'm happy with the president, not happy with the president, happy with the prime minister, not happy with the prime minister, and not, I will vote for ALDE because then Madame Strack-Zimmermann might be the next president of the Commission. People didn't vote in Luxembourg for the Conservatives because they hoped that Ursula von der Leyen would be the president. So we speak about European elections, but it's very often the national context who makes the choice of the people.
Sorry, fully agree with.
Sorry, I just want to mix it up, but please go ahead.
So that you can have the final word. I think it's fair. I see what you're saying, Xavier, but I don't think we're there politically. We spent a lot of time this afternoon talking about the need to know what people are concerned about. And if you asked about the ability to have an European view on their choices, political choices, that will be very much down the list. Perhaps it's our job to make it gradually go up the list, but they want to have their local problem solved. So I agree with the premise of the question. Yes, we have 27 national elections, and I think they'll continue to be 27 national elections for some time, and we shouldn't force from the top down that changes. But one different thing is that in each of those 27 national elections, the local national parties have some tools or some things in the European liberal movement that they can use for their own national campaign. I'll give you an example. Well, I can't think of an example which is not silly, but silly examples also work. Suppose that Cristiano Ronaldo would be a figurehead of the liberal movement. Each of the 27 national parties could say, you vote for us here because we have a great solution for housing and for cost of living and the things that you were worried about, but you also belong to a movement that has this figurehead which is very known. I know I used a very silly example and probably the wrong person, but you see my point. You have either an idea or a person or a movement or a feeling that you want to belong to, and if we are able to build that at the European level, and if that can be done now. We don't have to wait 20 years to do it. We start doing it now because it takes some time, and then you can help to some extent in some countries more, some countries less. You can help the national campaigns. But I realistically don't think they'll stop being national campaigns anytime very soon.
Michael?
Of course, I agree. But what I can imagine happening, or it would be good to start working on it now, is that perhaps you can have regional or much deeper regional connections and interconnected campaigns, say in Central Europe for us. We have good relationship with partners from the Czech Republic, Hungary, Poland to some extent, or NEOS in Austria. And for instance, there are Slovak politicians who were very famous and trusted in the Czech Republic, like Zuzana Čaputová, the president of the country, who is from our party, and she was extremely popular in the Czech Republic. Now she's gone from political life, and I'm not saying she's coming back, I'm just saying that there are, for instance, between Slovakia and the Czech Republic, because the language is so similar, I can imagine running not a joint campaign, but campaigns which are quite interconnected and in which the parties are aware of what the other party is doing and which are campaigning informally, so to speak, together for the same or similar vision of what Central Europe can be like in a stronger European Union. So I can imagine perhaps these kinds of regional cooperative ventures, but of course it's always going to be 27 national campaigns unless something radical changes institutionally in the European Union.
Indeed, I think the European Parliament has already taken positions in favor of the European transnational list. It would be easy or interesting or useful to create a European spirit and to try to move from very national elections to pro-European elections. So we already have position from the European Parliament side. Now the ball in the court of the Council to put in place for the next election the transnational list, but also indeed with transnational list we will continue to have those national debates, because for each country the question is what is our link to Europe, what Europe brings us and what we can bring to Europe, what kind of common projects we can have all together. So for sure this will continue to be at some points national elections, and this is important that we can continue to have this debate. Just coming back to the issue of the leadership, as Xavier said, indeed, each time we win quite clearly elections, we had leadership. You spoke about João, about Michel, about Emmanuel Macron in France, for example. In those cases, we had strong leaderships that enabled us, our candidates, to make huge scores and to be really efficient and take points in the debate. But when we don't have, how does it work with the EPP and socialists where they don't have any leaderships? They have roots, as you said, Xavier. So it means that one of our tasks is to also build some roots and you said, Michal, that you managed to, some people said you will never, as liberal, be strong in a conservative party. It makes me think about one thing. So most of the time, we are seen as elitist parties. And most of the time, we attract voters, entrepreneurs, wealthy voters, intellectuals. That's quite good. But we should think how to keep to our position, of course, but to become massive parties, popular parties, as EPP and socialists are, having or not strong leadership, strong figure, charismatic leaderships. And so that's a reflection that we have to do at the national level, but also through our Renew family, to think above our national specificities and identity, how we can move and build or reinforce these roots that we have to build together.
Thank you so much. With that hope, dear audience, thank you very much for attending this panel debate. I hope it was of great inspiration to all of you. And please give a warm thank to the panel.
I have to go.
Happy landings.